Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello there, welcome back to Lost Signals, Games and Gaming Culture. I'm coming at you in ColecoVision. Scott Thurlow, your host, and I'm here with my 8-bit partner, Rich Perry.
I'm also in stereo.
my 16-bit partner, Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Beep, beep, beep.
And my Pong partner, Stephen Hermosi.
The red wire goes into the red port.
Yes. And as you might have gathered, we're going to discuss retro style games tonight. So I think we're going to start off with like sort of a broad, maybe we'll try to pin down like what counts as a retro game, like what elements does it have to have, you know, if we agree upon some sort of Venn diagram of what would be a retro style game. So I'm going to toss it over to E because we were talking a bit about precast about like sort of a concept that you can expand upon in this very subject.
Now, are you referencing the ship of Theseus?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a sense.
Love it.
There's a philosophical
Thought experiment.
Conundrum, yeah, thought experiment, which is, which I like. There's a lot of different versions of it, but the one I'm going to give is, there's a ship that belonged to Theseus, and it goes in for repairs. And they start taking off pieces of the ship and putting new parts. And meanwhile, in this version, the workers take the parts they're throwing out and build a new ship out of it.
Right.
And when, in this sense, Theseus here is a Athenian merchant. Which ship is mine? Is it the one here that is built of new parts, or is it the one built of the old parts? And it's this like how much of a can be taken off of a original thing before it's no longer
that
what
thing
it was.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess my definition would be again, it's not like a hard and like pinned down one, but something loosely like I referenced in the intro, like the graphical choice of styles, right? The old like if you're using an 8-bit style or 16-bit style like engine to, or at least artwork, sprites, and so forth to release a modern game, then I think that like it's clearly like they're intending it to be a retro-influenced game.
I'd say that's the most obvious.
Right? Like, that's one of the main ones you could probably point to easily. But there are also things like, one of the genres is Metroidvania, right? Which, yes, those are also original, like, retro, like, from the era that retro is referencing. But you could have a game with modern graphics that has that sort of mechanic, like opening new areas through upgrades and new items and so forth. But it doesn't have to have the old 16 or 8-bit style graphics, you know. But that could be a, you know, retro influenced kind of game. So what do you think? What do you guys?
Well, I think that I think it can be expanded to be anything that shares a
connection in some
modest
sense.
Amount, or like a decent amount of connection to games that were coming out in the 80s and 90s. And it could be thematic. It could be graphics is the most obvious one. So you see like a game like Shovel Knight or Braid or something, which we'll talk about, and those are like obviously retro games because they look like old games,
right?
But it can be like thematic elements. It can be like
that's interesting. Yeah.
Like a lot of the appeal of those old games is like using an 8-bit sound design type of thing. Sure. And like, you know, stuff like that. Like a lot of times they'll throw stuff like that into that. An interesting little side bar to this, I guess, is that I just thought of is like in Wolfenstein and in Doom, the new ones, they have like areas where you can go play old levels
They're
from
like
the old
little
games.
Things. Yeah, that's right.
And like, I wouldn't necessarily call those retro games, but it's interesting that they have like retro throwbacks in them, stuff like that.
Yeah, they're almost like Easter eggs, or you find like little posters or like little gates or whatever that chips you back to the old, like the original style.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I think in Wolfenstein you like lay down on a bed, and like in Doom you find like a door that that brings you back to Doom 2 or whatever.
Right. What do you think, Rich?
I think this like what you guys are talking about is similar to what Nintendo does with their games. Sometimes they'll have they'll sneak the old arcade cabinets in there.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that.
Sure, you got your SNES Classic or the Nintendo Classic shit, which is very popular. It's still hard to find.
So, actually, before we go on, I'm interested in where we make the cutoff for retro games, because I don't think anybody would say that like a new Mario game is a retro game, right?
No.
Or like the new Zelda is not a retro game, but they do steal a lot. They use a lot of the old.
They continue a lot of what the old elements are.
Actually, that's exactly the point I was going to bring up. Which, if you think about like a number line over time, you would not first person shooters take look at, for example, a PS1 first person shooter and a PS4 first person shooter has different mechanics, but it's on a continuous line that you really can't say you're doing a throwback to a PS1 style shooter. If you go to Wolfenstein 3D,
right,
that's not a continuous, it's an actual leap that you have to make there. So yeah, Mario has been on the continuous track since, even through its 3D transition.
Sure.
It kept enough of its core,
its core identity, we'll say.
Especially when it went back to, or in the Wii U, when it went back to the side scroller style.
Yeah.
With the
But would you call that a retro game? I don't think I would.
It's the continuous line. It's
I think we're agreeing.
Okay, I see what you mean.
In this instance, because of that, then it wouldn't actually count.
Okay.
Like, for instance, original Metroid for NES and Super Metroid, very different games, but you can see how that, like,
the progression there.
Yeah.
But, so there is that, like, I think you can, when it breaks and it makes that jump to a new technology or a new methods of running things, then you can return
to that sort of
to the original part. And I actually also believe that certain games, yes, it broke, but after the break, it still kind of continues. So like Limbo and
Inside, stuff like that.
I wouldn't call retro, even though they're in a sense using.
They're basically platformers, side-scrolling platformers.
But yeah, while it has changed, it still feels like on the continuity.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. Those don't feel like games that would have come out in the 90s, right?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Like I think that
even thematically, as you were saying, they're a bit removed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it needs to, like. I know it's a very like subjective thing, but I think it needs to have that like 90s feel in order to be a retro game, right? Where like something feels like new. Like the games certainly have like a new feel, like Limbo, Inside. Like it's something that's they have elements of those old games, but so does everything. You know, like old games started games. That's where they come from.
I mean, you're right.
It's
it's a tricky slope, like I was saying, but I think there is some kind of.
I think there's almost a need to like be somewhat meta in order to be retro, right? Like. I guess you can play it straight, though. That's not necessarily true. Like, you can play it, like, straight up, like, no really meta commentary. But, like, it just has to have this, like...
nostalgic feel, maybe?
I don't want to say nostalgic. I like this aura of, like, 90s, like, games or 80s games or whatever. I didn't mean to just make it 90s, but, like...
Sure.
You know...
I get what you mean, though.
Sure, there's actually... Plus, there's starting to be a bunch of... a trend of remaking games with new graphics, like Spiral and
yeah, but I wouldn't call that retro either. Like a remake of, like the remake that they're going to do of Final Fantasy VII, even though Final Fantasy VII came out firmly entrenched in the 90s. Like I wouldn't call that a retro game.
Well, remakes and remasters sort of like their own beast as well.
Yeah,
like that's what we're sort of parsing out. So like again, you're right. Like I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast like cutoff, but I think there's a group of elements, like, you're a fan of, like, set theory, more or less. So if you take, like, a number of elements from the original games, from the era of the 80s, 90s, like, around then, like, the third or fourth generation of consoles, and so forth, and then, if you look at a game that coming out now, if those games contain, like, a lot of the same elements, if not the graphical style themselves, then even the mechanics, like, I was gonna move on to, like, just name some of the modern-ish retro games, retro style ones.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
If before we do like our list, because I know we do that a lot, but I had one other thing that I wanted to discuss. Okay. If you guys want to do that before, tell me if you want to do it before or after. I'm just gonna throw this in here.
Yeah, go for it.
Why are retro games such a big thing now? And I want to talk about that.
That's a good question.
Sure.
It's one I want to talk about. Let's address that afterwards. I think it'll be good, like summary follow. But definitely that's something I wanted to talk about.
All right.
But like, so I'll try to sort of transition and tie it in because I feel as if, or at least when I was making my list of just retro style games, a lot of them are 2D platformers or like run and gun, like sort of speed performance platformers. Which is like kind of a Mario mechanic.
It was the easiest type of game to make back in the day. So you don't have too much more than that.
Right. So in that case, like that to me, sort of is like the nostalgia thing you were saying. Like it reminds you of the original ones because it's just a straight up like that mechanic is just go left to right usually, and with platforms and hazards and so forth to jump around to get around, and maybe you have like some abilities here and there, but more or less it's that. Like so, Super Meat Boy is one I had on there. Like it's one of the early one. Braid, in fact, was even before that, and I would argue that possibly started putting the resurgence of retro style games like on the map, or at least kind of initiated the wave of that.
You know what? Interestingly, I think that before that, the Penny Arcade guys did their first RPG game.
I thought that was after Braid. It was near and around then. I remember that though, yeah.
But those games were fun. They were very like I think the first two were very different styles than like the third and fourth one. But
for sure.
Yeah,
I do remember though. That's good that you brought that up. But no, so it's like
sorry,
that's fine.
Tangent.
But yeah, like I was trying to transition to, but that's perfectly valid. Just that that style, like almost, you can't help but being reminded of the old school games because that was by and large that's mostly what they were. Even Mega Man is basically a running gunner 2D platformer. So yeah, like so I know you mentioned Shovel Knight. I know you really like that game. That's pretty
I love
much
Shovel Knight. It was great. Yeah.
I think we all played, or at least 3 of us did, Broforce, if you remember that, which is basically like.
I didn't want to remember that, but thank you.
well, too bad because it's a retro style game. Would you agree though that that's definitely one of them?
Oh, certainly, it's a cynical appeal to nostalgia.
Okay, which we will address, but nevertheless,
so are all those.
So is everything associated with nostalgia.
Yeah, right. I understand that.
Well,
that's
right.
we often
I wouldn't say that per
touch
se,
upon
but
that,
I know you will.
Yeah.
I know you will.
We often touch upon that, but let's not get sucked in at this moment.
Sure.
But also like a recent one that we didn't get to play, but I know that you and I looked at it. Steve was Cuphead.
Xbox.
Which because it's an
Damn
exclusive.
you, Xbox.
Yeah.
I really wanted to play that.
Yeah, because again, but the thing is, that one, it's retro in a sense because it's the platform like boss fights, but
And
the art
also
style.
I was about to say the art
It's
style.
so weird.
It's not quite like 8-bit. It's hand drawn.
It's
a throwback to the old.
It's film. Film retro.
It's like 30s cartoon.
It's not video game retro. It's film retro, which is weird.
It's a retro
awesome.
sandwich.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
The nostalgia feeling.
That's funny.
Yeah.
No thanks.
But yeah. So there's a bunch of those. So like, then you have like, I would say I call them Zelda style games. So one that was on my list, it was like one of my games of the years 2 years ago. Game of the year that year was Hyperlight Drifter, which I quite liked, and that's again 8-bit style, sort of overworld dungeon. You go in dungeons and you get like again unlock an item that gets you through the dungeon. There's like secrets and stuff. But again, like
great game.
That game was definitely like selling itself like a marketing point as a throwback to that. So like yes, it was appealing to your to your individual taste and nostalgia, but nevertheless it was outright one, and also Titan Souls I think is a good one that's sort of related.
I agree. Now, interestingly enough, I know you did a bunch of notes for this, Scott, and thank you for doing that.
You can deviate though. What you got?
I'm interested in the fact that you put Binding of Isaac on this list because I don't know if I would call that a retro game.
Well, let's sort of talk it out as a case.
Zelda dungeon crawler.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's retro. Just because it's the same genre doesn't mean it's retro. I don't think.
That's a fair point.
Actually.
Now It has that like dungeon crawler feel, but I think it's advanced enough
because
in
it's a
like
roguelike,
gameplay style, and like I think it's different enough in gameplay style. Like it's not they don't do it like brutalizingly hard like retro games did. Like not retro games, but like
the original ones,
games
yes.
did. It is very hard to like get all of the achievements, but that's more of a new game type of thing. I would say. I don't know. I just don't see it as a retro game.
All right, in my description earlier, I said that if it's on the continuity, and the continuity can break, it can stop developing a certain style, and it can restart. And I think you're right about that. Isaac would be on the not a direct continuity, but it's still on.
It's definitely a jump forward, as opposed to like trying to grab the same style as like the retro type.
I think you had like I think I would agree. Like you're right. I threw it on there because it sort of like seemed to be lumped in, but
I mean, it's a brilliant. It's a weird one. It's tough to say because it makes me feel like I felt when I was playing those games, but it's just done in a different way.
Sure,
that's the intent of it, to provide the same experience you would have playing kind of dungeon. So,
well, that's why I say it's tough, because it does kind of give me that same feel that I got when I'm playing those games, but it's also done in a different way than those games were done.
Yeah,
so like I think it's a leap forward in the technology. It's not really it's not the retro feel that retro games that I would call a retro game.
Yeah, it's more of a gray area, but I would, at this point, I would probably lean more towards agreeing that it's not as retro as some others, although it has some, like, perhaps we'll say surface elements to it.
Absolutely.
But you're right, like, having talked it out, like, I might not necessarily, like, put it in the category, but Isaac is a good game, so we'll give it credit on that.
Yeah, play it. It's great.
Yeah, so I'm going to move on to a couple others. For example, I don't know, does anybody here play Undertale, except for me?
I played a little bit of it.
Alright, so it was like an RPG
didn't play much.
with 8-bit graphics, or 16-bit at least, one of them. But that one was meta, Steve-O. Like, it did comment upon like some of the tropes and so forth, and like the overarching themes and stuff you often find that were in the original that era RPGs and stuff. I know like a very popular one that I haven't played, but some other friends of ours have Stardew Valley. Is basically Harvest Moon, if anybody ever played those ones.
But again, we don't continue continuity, or
it's basically a fan-made like sequel.
But I think that one shares a lot more with like the older stuff. Just from what I've seen of it, I haven't played it either, but it looks like that's more of a retro style.
It's definitely like going like it's more intending. Again, we often even in other shows, like we do TV movies and stuff, where the intent behind it, like, versus just how it happened to turn out.
Yeah.
So there's another one I want to get to. Sorry, did you have something?
Well, you're talking about RPGs at this point, and so I guess I will bring up the Penny Arcade games of this. Like here, the first couple were not really retro.
They were more modern style, yeah, for sure.
The third and I think it was the third and fourth games.
Part 3 and 4
were super retro RPG.
Yep,
and like definitely done in that style, and very meta as well. Like they called attention to it all the time. They were a lot of fun too. Except for they got a little grindy at the end.
Yeah, well, because like almost because of that,
vein.
yeah.
Right. Well, that's what RPGs do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The meta aspect, though, Earthbound on the SNES was incredibly meta and like brought up all the tropes of RPGs and all of that.
And then
it's weird that you classify meta as something that is kind of It feels like you're saying that's unique to us being able to reflect.
I don't think he's saying it has to be
what happened in the past, thus making it retro.
I see what you mean. I don't mean just meta-ness in general. I mean like the meta reflection upon its past iteration. So like in terms of retro games, like they are making fun of or not making fun, but like poking fun at themselves about how similar they are to like older games or things like that. Like it's the specific meta narrative about them being retro that I think happens with
applies,
retro games.
Yes.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
I know exactly what you mean, and like I didn't mean it in such a general sense, I guess.
Certainly, it's an aspect, and especially if they do it that way, then it's maybe like counts more versus others. But no, so I'll move on to it. So there's one game that I really love. I think you played a bit of it, Steve. I'm not sure if
I played a bunch. I think I know what you're going to say. I played a bunch of it.
There's a game called Axiom Verge, which is in the Metroidvania style, and like it almost. I think one level like pretty much is an outright like remake or like basically a reskin of a original Metroid level.
Metroid, yeah.
But that's fine. But it played just like that. You unlocked items and abilities, and then that meant you can go back through older areas of the stage and like get to secret areas and get to the next part and so forth and fight bosses. And it was a lot of fun. It was like one of the best retro style games that I've played.
It was great.
I always give it credit.
I stopped playing it at some point, but it was a lot of fun. And I wish I had finished it. I might go back and finish it.
Yeah,
soon.
It was hard too. Like,
yeah.
So actually,
it's not easy.
That's another thing I want to bring up: the difficulty level. So like, because of the limited nature of the original games, they were often very hard because either you couldn't save or you had the limited lives and so forth. But now that like technology has progressed, so maybe this might go back to your Ship of Theseus kind of thing, where if a game offers you like, I think Shovel Knight Steve-O is a good one because you can destroy the checkpoints for more money, or you can keep the checkpoints, like something like that.
Yeah.
So if a game like modern games often will give you a more forgiving save state, like right, you can save it in the middle of a stage or whatever. Whereas you couldn't do that originally.
Because this generation is the weakest generation.
No, it's because they didn't have enough memory on the fucking game cartridges to let you save anything.
Yeah. Kids today don't know what it's
Damn
like.
Damn it!
But no, so it was not like not as good as Axiom Verge, but there's another game that I played called Apotheon, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. It has sort of like the style of like if you could play like a Grecian urn as a character, like it was cool. Like that was the art style of it. But again, it was very Metroidvania where you went around like it was sort of like not quite God of War, but not also like too different from it in a sense. You went around Greek world and like meeting the gods and sometimes fighting them. Not always, but often, or like a monster like a Medusa or whatever. But you unlocked items and upgrades, and you could find secret areas and secret keys that give you more treasure and other shit. So like that was a good one too. That was in the vein. It was sort of straddled the line between a modern-ish one, but had the feel again like it just at the core of it, you could sense that it was going for that kind of thing.
What's the? I noticed you didn't have it on here, and it's maybe the game that you've played like the second most in the last 3 years.
Okay.
I don't even remember what it's called. Well Diver? Whatever the hell it's called.
Talking about Downwell.
Downwell. Yeah. Downwell.
Not Clam Digger. That's a different game.
I'm surprised you didn't put that on here. It's a very retro game. And I know you played a ton of it.
Good call. Downwell was really good. Yeah. The premise was you're just like an anthropomorphic like blob jump down a well and you have guns on your feet shoot out things. So, but you can have a different kind of guns. So like you can shoot a laser or like a spread gun or shotgun or whatever. Yeah, you're right. And that was definitely 8-bit style, like very old school. And it was a lot of fun. It was basically it had like 6-7 levels like max, but they got increasingly harder and you couldn't save between them. Yeah, good call. I did forget about Downwell, but I would say that's firmly in the retro style game camp. So there's like a bunch of others as well. For example, I'll throw out one more. If you want to talk about Metroidvania, they just recently released Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which is like a precursor to Ritual of the Night, which is like done by, I can't remember his name, but the creative director of Castlevania. But it basically was a Castlevania game, like with the same graphics, with the same exact kind of stuff. Basically more like 3, because you could find different characters and switch off between them and use their ability. Like you could definitely turn into a bat, which is one 3, and this one too. And then you can like go to different areas and like go to shortcuts and stuff.
I played a bit of it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So like there's some others. I know there's a bunch that we played that, again, would we agree that Hotline Miami is a retro game?
I think that it's got strangely the feel of like some old, not really console games, but computer games.
Yeah, okay.
Computer games, I would say.
Okay.
Like old games that I play that are like just real quick twitch, and like you can't really do that on a Nintendo, but you could do it on a PC back in the day.
Yeah. That's fair.
But yeah, like I think it does have like that old school feel to it. I like that you put Retro City Rampage on here.
Yeah, well, I was going to let for you guys, because I didn't actually play Retro City Rampage, but I know you guys did and enjoyed it. So, I mean, it was kind of the same thing. It was a top-down sort of old school, like GTA.
It's like the original GTA, basically. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Citizens of Earth, anyone?
I think only you played it. No.
No? Audience?
I did not.
No? Okay.
I'm the only one in the world that played this game?
It's actually, if you're a fan of Earthbound, which I brought up earlier, it's an RPG just like that. Kind of both commenting upon RPGs and also the state of America today.
Very nice. Which is somewhat meta in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, that was definitely a retro game.
Mother 3? No. Never mind. You remember my bonus points?
Yeah. Check out that bonus points from way back in the day. But
the
Rich,
Mother Death.
You got any good ones that you like, or like ones that you enjoyed the most?
Castle Crashers when that came out.
Oh yeah.
You and I played it. I totally forgot about that game.
I forgot about that game too.
That game.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That was solid.
When the Scott Pilgrim game came out, that was like pretty much Scott Pilgrim characters in River City Ransom.
Okay, nice. That's cool.
Which is pretty sick.
I didn't play that one, but that's cool. So yeah, man. So I'll just finish up like the games, and then we'll go back to what you were saying earlier, Steve-O. Mm-hmm. So like at E3 this year, they showed a game off a game called Tunic. which is basically, again, a Zelda sort of inspired, like, overworld map and dungeon item upgrading thing. It looks really cool, though. The art style itself is pretty unique. And there's another one I just found out about, like, last week or so, very recently. It's called Blazing Chrome. It looks like Contra, like Contra 2 or Alien Wars. And I fucking love that game. And it's, again, 6 feet. It's got, like, big alien monsters and, like, 2 dudes just, like, going through, like, a ruined city, just shooting everything.
It's just 2 dudes.
Yeah.
Just two
guys
brothers.
2 guys plus aliens. But it looks really cool. Again, it's definitely in that vein.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to seeing some more retro games. I like to see games that don't only bank on nostalgia for.
Well, let's transition to that, since that's our next. Not
to say that nostalgia is a bad thing. I know that Ian will take that part for us, but like, I like to see games that do something new in an old style. You know.
So let's address now. Oh, go ahead.
Why are retro games a thing? Go ahead, Ian.
You first.
So I'm going to ignore the entire cynical appeal to nostalgia and offer 2 variants to it.
Okay.
One is, like, if I ever developed a game, I would like to make an old school SNES RPG because I loved those as a kid. And I want to create something, as I said, new, or like a new storyline in a kind of, to make a new kind of Earthbound type thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I also think that a lot of developers who may not have the money to develop AAA games can look and say, hey, they perfected the art of 2D side-scrollers or the RPGs, Metroidvania, any of those. I can, with a limited budget, create a very complex game out of it that will help me propel my career.
Yeah.
So I think those are 2 non-cynical looks at why these are developed.
That was actually my first point, is that they're cheaper.
Production
indie studios are making a lot more games these days because they can actually get in and get a hold of these development tools and use them to make a game for cheap. And one person, as we saw with Axiom Verge, even, and I think was a really incredible, intense game.
A very small 2 or 3 person team made Hyperlate as well.
Yeah, same deal, exactly. So like, you see these very small studios or just a person making these games, and they're easy to make because the graphics don't have to be out of this world. You just have to make a good plot and a good game.
Yeah, so that actually was going to be my first answer if we're somewhat like not brushing over, but not delving into the nostalgia as cynical cash grab like angle to it, because the barrier to entry production value is a lot lower versus like a AAA studio. So like you said, Steve-O, you can get like a sort of a suite of sprite artwork and so forth, and then you can mess with it yourself. I actually just thought of this. This is like a while back when we covered I can't remember the name of the movie. Indie Game, the movie, I think maybe. Whatever one that featured Phil Fish, who made Fez, which is also a retro game. But he was like, basically just me like messing around with like the various the scales and the sliders and so forth, and a bunch of pixel artwork, and then making the game built out of that, because it's again a cheap and easy-ish like program to work with. Yeah, or programs that you can use.
I can tell you from personal experience, it's a lot easier to work with those than.
Well, I guess we should mention Rich did a little bit of studying for making games in college, and
when can we see your retro game coming out, Rich?
Yeah, we're waiting for it.
It's on hiatus.
He's working on it. It's in production now. But I think those are the 2 points that you made, especially that one, is that I think is a reason why we see a lot more of them. And like, of course, they're appealing to a certain section of the audience that who is going to be into them. But I think like that's valid. It's not as cynical as we may often say or think it is.
Maybe not, but also I have this in the cynical side.
Okay, but what is cynical then?
As you may have noticed, over the last like 10 to 15 years, we've been seeing a huge amount of reboots and remakes in the film industry, and I think that this is kind of just following suit to some degree.
In a sense,
I think there's kind of a general wave of nostalgia going on right now for the 80s and 90s, as there was in the 80s and 90s for the 50s.
60s and 50s.
The 50s and 60s, yeah.
That's a good point.
Because no one looks back on the 70s fondly.
Not even the 70s.
Well, no. And the 70s, because everybody that was growing up in the 70s was like, oh man, I wish I was doing as much drugs and having as much sex as I had in the 70s.
I suppose.
But I think that's definitely a factor.
I would agree.
Is how big that these remakes and reboots have been, and like that's happening in the gaming industry too. Outside of retro games, is like there's a lot of reboots and remakes and things like that. Another thing that I had was, they just fill a different niche. Like they tend to be shorter.
Yeah.
They tend to be like easier to play it's shorter in both like session length and game length.
Right. You can get
right.
You can do
so
like
you can
bite-sized sessions, and then it's not as long as like again like a modern
exactly. You can play for like half an hour and be all right. Whereas like if you pick up Fallout or something like that, you're gonna play for 2 hours at least. You know, like usually.
That's a good point.
Or at least I do. And then you don't have to put in 100 hours to finish a game. You can put in like 8 hours, 5 or 6 hours or whatever, and you're done.
Sure.
You know? So I think that those are a lot of the reasons. I'm sure there's others. Feel free to let us know.
Yeah, I think those are like valid and legit ones that like make sense as to why you're seeing like they're getting more popular, or have been at least for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a bunch of them. But like I'm not opposed to it. I think it's I personally enjoy seeing a lot of retro games come out. Am I going to play them all? No, but I'll play some of the good ones, or at least the ones that appeal to within the niche of that, appeal to my personal, preferences.
I think it also has the added effect of like getting kids who didn't grow up in the same games that we did a chance to like go back, like the one look back and experience.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, it's all solid. So I mean, I named off a lot of the ones that I liked, and there's like I said, a couple coming up, and I'm certainly will see a bunch. I have to give a shout out. Actually, I gave them a shout out in the E3 episode, but Devolver Digital publishers happen to like just publish a lot of the retro style games, so I'll give them a lot. Like they're like one of the leading ones who are like bringing these indie smaller studios into the fold. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll publish your retro game, and we'll get it out there.
We should bring this up if we talk to Ara again. We got to get him back on.
Okay, yeah.
Talk to him about retro games and his experience with
Maybe we'll do a follow-up with our buddy Ara. We haven't talked in a while, but yeah, good call. But not anything else or anything in general that I missed that you guys wanted to say about
just made
retro?
Me realize I need to start playing more of these new retro games.
Yeah.
You gotta check them out, man.
I'll always give you a shout. Like if I see or find one that's good, I'll let you guys know, and I'll put on the site and so forth.
Anybody who got Binding of Isaac for free made so much fucking...
Yeah, it was the best thing.
It made such a great investment. Like, I don't know, like, I know you two got it for free, right?
Yep.
Did you get it for free? I didn't. I paid like $10 for it, and it's the best $10 I've ever spent. Like, I probably spent 200 hours playing that
my
game.
return investment on that game was ridiculous because I invested zero, but I got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's solid. And like that's another thing too. That just ties back to what you said. Because the production value is a bit lower, because it's a bit easier, again, versus like a big AAA budget, then these games probably cost you like $10, $20 maybe tops, like somewhere in between there, because they don't need to charge as much. And like you said, like they're shorter, so you can get they're more bite sized in a sense. Yeah. Therefore, they're a lot more like sort of manageable. Like buy like 3 or 4 of them. Like I'll get through them in like a month or less. And
yeah, exactly.
It's not a strain. It's not like shelling out $60, $70 for a AAA game, and then to shell another $30 for microtransactions or like DLC or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. I like I said, I personally am pretty cool with this trend, and I'm just hope like you said, they'll take like what's there and maybe innovate a bit with them. But I do it always appeals to me. Yes, of course, for nostalgia factor to a bit to see a 16-bit style or 8-bit style game. Like, yeah, man, that's what I grew up on, So like, I'm gonna check your game out probably.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I agree. I could go off on another tangent, but I won't.
Nah, how about we'll leave it at that
and call it that
for now for retro games. Yeah, any final thoughts other than check some of them out? Check some of the ones that we mentioned that were some of the best out, and I think that's it for tonight. I've been Scott Thurlow, of course, here with Rich Perry.
Have a good night.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
My life has become one of those impossible puzzles from point-and-click adventure games.
Yeah, he's stuck pixel hunting in his life. And Cyrano Mosey. Yep, see you next time. Have a good one. Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.